Friends and family from all over my beautiful country of South Africa, Mzansi, welcome to our friends and family all over our beautiful continent, our absolutely gorgeous, mineral-rich, intelligence-rich, culture-rich, artistically rich, in every sense of the word, rich continent, our motherland, Africa. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. Friends, I've got a surprise for you. We actually have a growing base in the United States of America. So to our friends out there in the US, thank you very much for your loyal listenership. Please continue to share our podcast with friends and family and your network. You never know, we might just touch base in your hood, at the right appointed time and just come and do a talk and hang out and engage on all things life. So thank you very much. Friends, welcome to this week's episode of the Simply Label podcast, or as we rightly say it in our Simply Label podcast lingo, a tada. I am looking forward to this. You probably are so used to hearing me say this because I look forward to every episode that we publish, right? But the reason why I look forward particularly to this week's episode is that it touches on a subject which I haven't heard being spoken of, as often as it should, in my humble opinion, but also because of its pervasive impact on the well-being of people in the workplace, particularly in the workplace, as it were. And some of you may have already guessed or get a sense of what the subject of discussion is. Today, we are talking about toxic leadership. Yes, toxic leadership. What do we mean by the word toxic? Let's just pull it apart for just a moment. Toxic literally means poisonous, right? Poisonous, or very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way, right? Toxic literally means poisonous or very harmful, very unpleasant. There can be nothing good that can come out of anything that is toxic. In fact, if I can be a little bit more candid, it actually means deadly. Deadly. So, in the context then of leadership, what does it mean? And I think it's important for us to build a framework within which we're going to engage on this subject, at this particular point in this podcast and perhaps in future podcasts. So, what does it then mean from a leadership perspective? So, in other words, what is toxic leadership? For today's, in the context of today's episode or discussion, this is what it means. It's a combination of self-centered attitudes, motivations, and behaviors that have an adverse or negative effect on subordinates, the organization, and mission performance. So toxic leadership literally is a combination of many, outwardly expressed behaviors, if you will, right? And it's an internal posture that is expressed outwardly in various ways, and it cannot be good for any organization. And some of you are already kind of getting a sense and relating to, to what we're talking about based on your own personal experience. I know personally, I can relate as well. So, literally, toxic leadership impacts not only at an individual level, or individual colleagues within an organization, but it also impacts the organization itself. It harms the organization, and then more importantly, it also harms the ability of an organization to achieve its intended goals or purposes, as it were. So you might be asking the question now: what are the signs? How do we know that we are experiencing or expressing ourselves toxic leadership? How do we know? And this is a moment of reflection for me and for many of us that are listening right now. Some of the signs, and I want to perhaps use a lot more adjectives in describing, toxic leadership, so that we understand it from a perspective that says, what does a toxic leader look like? What sort of attributes do they display? What sort of tendencies do they display? Number one, they tend to be arrogant. They tend to be autocratic. I think those two are self-explanatory, right? Arrogant, nobody can fake humility, right? If you're arrogant, it comes across. Everything you do is all about you. There's another word to describe this, is pompous. It's feeling like a good friend of mine from the Northern Cape likes to say, it's like, when you're always behaving like you're a man of the match. Right? Man of the match. You're autocratic. There's the tendency to be autocratic, meaning, everything rises and falls on you. So everything you say goes. You don't want to be challenged. You don't want to be, to be asked questions. Colleagues that are working with you must just toe the line, and that's it. Right? Some of the other signs are they tend to be irritable. They are annoyed by absolutely everything. They are hard to please. They are manipulative. They tend to be manipulative. They tend to also be intimidating. They tend to be overly competitive. And I'm going to come back to that to explain a little bit more. They tend to be discriminatory. And they also tend to be fear-mongering. I can talk the whole day about that last one. Overly competitive. What do we mean by this? Nothing wrong with being competitive. In fact, I'm a huge advocate for being competitive, because a person that is competitive, tends to also be growth minded. I'm my worst competitor and also my best, because I operate from a stance that says I want to be better than I was the previous day. I want to be better than I was last week. I want to be better than I was the previous year. And even in a team, there can be a culture of healthy competition, where colleagues, because of an incentive that is in place, are competing healthily so with one another to get to the ultimate goal, to attain a particular goal. But ultimately, who wins? It is the organization. But there, it's got to be guarded very, very closely by the leader to make sure that it is competitive. So the only trouble is when it goes to the extreme other side, where the leader's ambition, the leader's sense of, I want to win at all costs gets in the way, where they will trample and step on anything and anyone that gets in their way of getting to the number one spot. They will get there come hell or high waters, leaving a trail of bodies behind them, just because winning for them is absolutely everything and nothing else matters. There is a problem when the attitude of competitiveness is built around the leader's own personal ambition. Right? Does it make sense? I trust it makes sense for some of us. Fear-mongering, if I can just touch on that a little bit. Nothing like fear to cripple morale. Nothing like fear to cripple creativity. Nothing like fear to take away the freedom of people in the workplace to be the best versions of themselves. A leader that leads by fear, you can actually tell if you're an outsider coming into a team or an organization. You can tell when you're sitting in a meeting, when people are quiet and the only voice that echoes in the meeting is the leader's voice and nobody else's voice. You can tell. And I don't understand why certain leaders tend to do that, because fear limits freedom. Right? So, yeah, I think let's take it from here. So those are some of the signs, right? Those are some of the signs you can, or telltale signs, as it were. Now, I want us to take it a notch up, and let's go to the next subtopic around this. What are the effects or impact? What is the impact of this type of leadership in an organization? Now, for me, this is where the rubber hits the road, and I want to invite every one of you to pay close attention. If you're taking notes, do take the notes on this. I think many of us are going to relate to what I'm about to say. The impact, or some of the obvious and sometimes detrimental impacts of toxic leadership are the following. Some of them: lower levels of commitment from staff or colleagues, lower job satisfaction, so people just disengage completely from the organization. Even people who would ordinarily be passionate about their specific job, the environment is such that even the joy out of that is taken away, and you get to a point where you simply just it's difficult to wake up in the morning and to encourage yourself to get to work or to the workplace, as it were. The level of engagement goes to an all-time low. I had the privilege and the honor of doing my honors research paper about 5 years ago, and my then provincial head, thank God for him, because he gave me the opportunity to use our organization, particularly in the provincial context, as a research ground for me. And my subject was I was very curious about the impact of leadership on employee engagement. And I define engagement here as, in essence, how excited people are, and how connected they are to the culture, the mission, just the sense of being, a part of the organization and contributing at their absolute best. Most of the time, at least. And the results were quite telling. The results were quite telling. There was a very clear sense and conclusion, and my sample size was quite significant. At that stage, there were close to 1,000 colleagues, and my sample size of people who responded to my research were more than 350, roughly. So one could argue that the sample size was pretty much representative of the population. So the insights were then quite credible, as it were. And some of the conclusions were very clear that people, some of the most talented people, were leaving the organization not because they hated the organization itself or the benefits of the organization. In fact, that organization paid very well, quite frankly. But they left because of the leader. And those that were there, that remained, were purely in survival mode because, they needed the job. So we can ignore it at our own peril if we are running organizations and we think, people need us, so they will therefore just stick around no matter what. No, the ones that will remain are those that don't have a choice or don't have any other options. But your best ones will continue to leave, which leads me to the next point. The other, telltale signs that that there is toxic leadership and how it has impacted the organization is that there will be a high turnover of employees, particularly, high performing employees. There will be a sense of fear. The sick leave as well will go high. It will go up. It will be pervasively high. It's a telltale sign. Lower performance is the other impact at an individual level, but of course that will, inevitably impact the organization. There will be high anxiety, high stress, high level of depression and fatigue, as well as detachment from the organization. Right? So you can already tell there's a good sense of, toxic leadership having a direct impact on the overall mental health of people at the receiving end of this kind of leadership. To the extent where researchers have actually concluded, based on real evidence, scientific evidence, that toxic leadership actually causes PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes, toxic leadership is lethal. It is traumatic. And at this point, some of us that are listening are thinking, oh my goodness, it is no wonder I am on antidepressants. It is no wonder that on Friday afternoon, I'm so excited to be going home and not to have to deal with this environment for at least the next 2 days. I will numb myself with alcohol. I will numb myself with other substance, God forbid. I just want to go home and forget about it all. I will see everything on Monday. But come Sunday evening or afternoon, that level of anxiety comes back, that level of the sense of panic comes in, because you're going to have to go to work tomorrow and meet that leader who just gives you those palpitations. Friends, let me tell you a little bit of my story. I once worked, in fact, more than once, under toxic leadership. I will not mention names because the purpose of this podcast is not to shame and name, but it's really empower. But we got to make it real. We got to keep it real. And I must tell you, I was that guy. Friday afternoons, I was excited because for 2 days, I don't have to deal with this. Come Monday, in fact, Sunday evening, and this is many years ago, by the way, many years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. That's how real and that's how traumatic it was. And I was very good at my job, if I have to say so myself. I've always been passionate about leadership. I've always been passionate about people. I've always been passionate about taking time to transform a culture of an organization so that the performance is as a consequence of the culture. And that has gotten me in trouble in many organizations I've worked for. Not many, but some of them. Because I understand the fundamentals of performance on its own is just a symptom of something else. I think we will do soon a topic on leadership and culture. But where I want to end with this is, I completely relate with some of you that are listening, that are thinking, my goodness, I need help. I'm just in an environment where I'm barely surviving. I'm experiencing high sense of just trauma, as well as depression, anxiety, panic. Some of you you're not even sleeping. You're having to drink pills just to help you sleep, because you're thinking about that presentation that you got to prepare. Is it good enough? Is it not? Is it going to be torn apart like the last one? What's happening? It is traumatic to work under a toxic leader. So friends, I want to make some suggestions to you. If you are that person listening, there are 4 things that I'm going to propose that might help. Number 1, get help. Get help as quickly as possible. And in your getting help, bring in your family. Invite your family into your head space, your heart space. Let them understand why you've been behaving erratically. Let them understand why you sometimes withdraw and you just want to be alone. Let them understand what you're dealing with at work. You'll be surprised as to how they will help you. They will be surprised. At the very least, they can be a listening ear, and if you believe in prayer, like some of us, they can pray for you. Those many years ago when I worked for that organization, my wife in particular was my absolute rock. She was at the core of my support structure. She prayed for me on nights and days where, I just felt weak. I felt useless. I felt I wasn't good enough. And she prayed for me, and something happened. And I got the strength to rise up the next morning and to face my Goliath. Number 2, get some counseling. While I'm talking about getting help, get counseling. If you're working in the banking or financial industry, there is ICAS. Find out what ICAS is. ICAS. That's an organization that has been contracted, to support financial services industry employees, and it is at no cost to you. The employer usually covers the cost. Also, think about writing to your HR department, and if you feel that your HR department is complicit in the culture, or that they are part of the problem, God forbid, then take it higher up. When you feel that you're ready emotionally, you've got the emotional capacity to deal with this, formalize an email and and escalate, to a much higher level. Number 2, document all incidents. When you are working with a toxic leader, they can be extremely manipulative. They are usually extremely intelligent individuals. So document all of these instances where you feel bullied, where you feel exploited, where you feel belittled. Document them, because one day, trust me, you may need to use that. Number 3, work on an exit strategy. I'm sorry, now you're thinking, yo, Lebo, are you saying I must just leave? No. Work on an exit strategy. If you've done all of the above and you've escalated and you're still not getting any joy, perhaps it's time to work on an exit strategy. And part of that exit strategy might also mean start reducing your debt, start reducing your commitments, start reviewing your lifestyle from a perspective of how much money you're spending on things that you probably don't need. Why? Because you want to save up enough money so that the day you decide to leave, and maybe you might not have something waiting for you, that you've got at least 6 months worth of living income that can sustain you while you find another opportunity. Because you don't want it to get to a stage where it is a battle between survival and sustenance, or a battle between you staying in a job because you need it and having to defend your well-being, your mental well-being, your life. Number 4, this is the final point I want to leave you with as I propose. Perform. Nothing like performance to shut up your critics. Nothing like performance, to create an opportunity for you to go to your next level. Every leader, whether they're toxic or not, every leader loves a top performer. So if you perform, you create a cushion for yourself, and you also create an opportunity for yourself. One of my favorite sayings is, let your work speak for you. Because if that environment doesn't improve, at the very least, your work will be, or the quality of your work and your performance will be a ticket to the next opportunity that will come. Now, finally, to the leader displaying these toxic behaviors, I want to be very candid and say, stop it. Stop it. You are destroying people and you are destroying the organization. I also want to say to you, get help. Get help. Deal with whatever trauma that you may have faced in the past. Deal with whatever it is I believe that people are not just born toxic. People don't just, rise up in the morning and say, whose life do I want to destroy? I believe they're dealing with something in their lives. And as the famous saying goes, hurt people hurt people. So I want to say to you, get help. I also want to say to you, listen to our Multiplier Leader series, part 1 and part 2 that we have on the Simply Label podcast. Just reach back a few episodes and be empowered by the insights that were shared there. Because what you're displaying are what we call diminisher attributes. And you need to be able to learn the behaviors, unlearn first the current behaviors, but also learn the behaviors of how to switch from being a diminisher to a multiplier. Can I also challenge you a little bit more? If you are this leader, apologize to your team. Apologize to the individuals in your team whom you have destroyed, whose confidence you've literally trampled over, whose sense of worth, whether you are doing it intentionally or unintentionally, your actions have diminished someone's sense of worth. Apologize to them genuinely and sincerely and own your actions. Lastly, lead from the heart. Lead from the heart. There is a place in leadership for love. If you cannot love your people, you cannot lead them effectively. Because leadership ultimately is a game of love. You've got to love the ones you are leading. You got to operate from a place of compassion. Even when you admonish, even when you discipline, it's got to come from a place of compassion. Because love covers a multitude of sins. So, family, we've come to this week's or the close of this week's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Do share our podcast. If you want to invite us to come and do a talk, train your team from a leadership perspective, write to us at if currently we're using my own email, we will set up as time goes a website and the right email for the podcast, but you can use my personal email. It's lebonyokong, LEBONYOKONG ZA@yahoo.com. So lebonyokong@yahoo.com. We will come back to you and set up time and engage on the way forward. Thank you for your support. Hope this episode was as impactful to you as it was to me. And see you again next time. Looking forward to your comments. Looking forward to your feedback. If I can ask everyone, every loyal listener, go in and rate our podcast. It really helps us to make sure that we continue to grow and continue to be of value and be a blessing to as many people as possible. Have yourself a brilliant week, and let us transform from the toxic leadership, and let us equip ourselves to become better leaders. God bless you. This is Simply Lebo. A tada.